then you all can take it away on the next presentation. And so this title of this next presentation, Playing with Privacy, a Critical Analysis of Data Collection in the Video Gaming Industry.
Are we starting? Yeah, okay. So as Gabriel said, it's a topic that is quite related to the previous one, and it's research we have conducted in a we were among a team of researchers from Quebec, where we would look at protection of personal data of children in a mobile game. So my first question for the public, and of course you don't need to answer, but I'm just wondering, like, how many of you have ever read the privacy policy of a game before playing it? Myself, I usually I don't. Like, you just bought the game, you are eager to play it, you are asked if you are agreed to the terms and conditions, you say yes. One time I tried to say no to Lego Star Wars or something like this. You're just in a loop where you go back to the main menu and you are asked the same question again. So eventually you would just say yes. So we have read these policies for you. We have studied 138 privacy policies for mobile game aimed at children. We have analyzed 54 policies related to paid game and 84 related to free games. We have studied games aimed at children, but like everything we are going to say today could apply to games available for adults or teenagers. But we have like focused on this one because you have a specific regulation for children, so you have some additional rights that are interesting to study, and it was the topic of our project.
So when we were looking at these privacy policies, so we were looking at a lot of stuff, but this is really the main things that we were looking for. So what information is collected? What do these video games company collect about you? How do they collect it? What are the means of collections? For what reason do they specify it? Because the law forces them to specify that, in Canada at least. What are your rights regarding this collection? Is it easy to exercise these rights when you look at the privacy policies? And what recourse and remedies are available to parents if there is any?
Yes, so do we know what information video game collects? Do you know what they collect about you? We said it in the previous presentation, they collect a lot. And we'll see also the way they do it. So what data they collect? First, they collect data about who you are. So email address, IP address, gender, in some cases, your name, country. They also collect information about the material you use. So the device type, is it a Macintosh, is it a PC, name of the material. They get also access to your internet service provider sometime. They also want to know about the way you play. So they collect your progression in the game. They collect your playtime. When do you start? When do you stop? Your game statistics. They know like where you click, which champion or character you prefer, things like this. The way you interact with them. So like financial and transaction data, depending on the case, information containing correspondence, everything with your exchange with the support services. They get all this data as well. And also, of course, like why not? Why not asking for it? Anything else you want to declare. So if you decide to link your social network, they will collect your profile, your pictures, your video, your contact list, things like this. So as you can see, it's a lot of information that they are collecting.
But before we go any further, really, we want to ask ourselves, what is personal data? What does the law tells us that it's personal data? So what the law says is that personal information, that's the Canadian law, is information that identifies you as an individual. It's quite a short definition. It's quite a broad definition. But what's interesting is when we read the privacy policies, they have a very different definition sometimes. And the definitions vary from policy to policy. And here we have an example that we extracted from a policy of what non-personal information would be. And they say it means information of an anonymous nature, and then they give example, and they give, for example, the IP address of your mobile device, your mobile operating system, and information about the way you use the applications. So it's quite interesting that some policies would consider information like that as non-personal information, because, for example, the IP address gives a lot of information about you, but some policy will say, well, that's not personal information. So that's something that we studied when we looked at the policies.
Yeah. And why do they want to collect your data? You might ask yourself, because they collect a lot. So why would they do this? Sometimes for very good reasons, as it's explained in the privacy policy, to create your account, because you requested to create an account. So they need an email address, they need a name, they need a username, they need this kind of information. To provide and deliver product and services you request, where it could be good, but it could also be like more questionable, as we'll see. And also to preventing and addressing fraud, breach of policies, and other things like this. And you see, this is a link to our presentation, because to prevent toxicity is the same. It's breach of policies. It's technically this, like toxicity is a breach of the policy. So they say that they are collecting the data to also like fight this kind of behavior. Are they doing it? It's a different question. Yeah, responding to your comment and your request, of course, so they need your information, the information you submit when you contact the support services. But also, as I said, for questionable reasons, to keep track of user behavior, and of course, to send you marketing email about services or products that you might be interested by. So basically, like the main reason they want your data is to send you targeted ads. It's something we see in a lot, if not every policy, because it's the way these games work. You know, a lot of them are free, and as you know, like when it's free, you are the product, and so they will use your data either to sell you more services or product, or to sell your data to someone else who will exploit your data. And in fact, they also like say that they want your data for any reason deemed relevant by the platform. So to me, you see, we find this a lot in their privacy policy. They collect your data to meet their legitimate interest. And I give you here an example of the way they define it, and you can see it's like very, very broad. So basically, it means for everything they want to do. You see, to study how customers use our products and services, to develop them, to grow our business. It's a lot. I mean, I could just have this, and I would say that it would cover everything they are doing. So as you see, a lot of potential use of your data.
But what we found out also is that another way that they use your data is they disclose it to third parties. So it's not just the video game industry that has access to your data. And basically, we have 4 categories of third parties that we found in the policies that we studied. So first of all, subsidiaries and affiliates. So if the company has subsidiaries or affiliates, then a lot of times they will transfer the data to these entities. Service providers, that's something that a lot of times they don't disclose who they are. Sometimes it's like a credit card company, which is we can expect, but sometimes we don't know who they are, and it's a very broad and vague third party. Public authorities, that's interesting because it relates to the toxicity part of our presentation. They say that they have the power to disclose your data to public authorities if you do fraud, if you do criminal behavior. Do they do it? That's something else. And then, most importantly, marketing, advertising, and analytics partners. What's interesting is the law normally forces them to tell in detail all of the third parties they disclose data to. Very rarely do we see that in policies. They just say we have marketing partners, and they don't say who they are. So that's something that we found out in the privacy policies that we studied too.
And it's you have to be very careful also when you read these policies and what you see written on the stores. For instance, because yesterday I was like looking at some games from Nintendo, for instance, and they were saying like, oh no, like on the store it says like no sharing data with third party. You look at the privacy policy, oh, we share it with our affiliate companies, and you have like a list of 30 companies. Some of them are not Nintendo. It's like other studios, partners, and they are sharing. They say that they are sharing your data. So you have to be very careful in the way you get your information and to cross it, because sometimes it's confusing and it's not the same information depending where you look at. How do they collect our data? So they use like different techniques to do it. But 3 main ways we can find the privacy policy: the information you provide, the information that is collected automatically, and the information obtained through third-party sources. Something I forgot to mention, they say they collect data, they tell you why they want this data, but sometimes I mean, most of the time, if not all the time, it's impossible to link the two. You don't know which data they will use for which use. So it's very hard to understand exactly what they are doing with all this information. So the information you provide, like age, email address, name, and they say they use it to validate your age, to store your game progress, to register and maintain your account. The information collected automatically is that the most scary, the one that is the most scary. Time spent on a page, information about your usage, statistic on how you interact with your operator, progress and result, number of clicks, the URL of the website you visit, duration of use or play. And as you can imagine, and I'm sure you have had this experience, like because of all this information they got on you, they can propose you like very specific product and services. If you play League of Legends, you know that like regularly during the year, they will propose you to buy some champions or champion skins that are exactly the champion you play, of course, and the one you play the most. So based on this information, they will try to sell you things that you really want, actually. And information collected from third party, as we said, like they will get access to your profile, and they can get your username, date of birth, contact details, phone pictures, the likes on your profile, list of friends, and they can exploit this list of friends without your friend knowing sometime. So it's kind of it's a lot of information they can get when you link your account to third party.
And what's interesting with these third parties is that, first of all, there's issue relating to data transfer. That's something that we found out in our research. Obviously, when you send data to another jurisdiction, there's some process that the company has to have, at least in Canadian law, to ensure security of the data. Very few policies have those kinds of information. They will just put a clause that will say, well, your information may be transferred. Like you have an example there. But they don't do anything to protect that information. And something that was extremely interesting about third parties is the sort of triangular relation that we found out that makes the policy extremely hard to understand if you don't read it correctly. Because you will have a video game operator that will say in the policy that it does not collect any personal data directly from players. So the players think, well, that's good. They don't collect my data. But what they will say later in the policy is that a third party will collect the data, and then that third party will transfer the data to the video game operator. So it's kind of a way to tell at the beginning of the policy, well, we don't collect data from you, but they do collect it just indirectly. And that's something that we found out in a lot of policy that makes them very hard to understand for the public. Also, something that was quite shocking that we found in the policy in some of the games, because we studied games for children, is that some of these games were clearly intended for children. Even their rating on the App Store says for children. But then we looked at the policy and it said, well, the game is for adults. Look at this. The game is not intended for use by children. Why do they do that? Because laws on privacy policies are stronger for children. There's some obligations for companies. So what do they do? Well, even if it's a game clearly made for children, they will say that in the policy, they will say that it's not a game for children. You shouldn't play it if you're children. So that's something that we found out in a lot of policies, and that was quite surprising and problematic.
Yes. So now let's look at what rights you have regarding this data. Technically, you have like some rights and broad rights, because you have a right of access to your data. You have a right to modify the data. You have a right of erasure and a right to withdraw consent to data collection. Once we have said this, it's kind of you have to question like what does it mean, because we tried with Gabriel to access our data for Riot and for League of Legends, and it's very interesting because when you look at the list of what they say they collect or they may collect, because a lot of times they just say we may collect, so you don't know exactly what they are collecting. It doesn't match what we receive, which is basically like the chat logs, the report made by people against you, and sometimes they are not like justified. So sometimes the list doesn't match. So I really encourage you to do the exercise and to ask your data for the game you are playing. I just did it for Nintendo, Gabriel, just to see like what I will receive. So right of access, right to modify the data. To be very honest with you, I don't even know what that means. What can you ask to be modified? I don't know. We have to test it, but I don't know exactly what it means. You have the right to withdraw consent to data collection. Very interesting in theory. In practice, right away they will tell you, however, if you decide to withdraw your consent, you might lose access to part or the whole or to lose access to the service. So basically you might not be able to play the game, and you might not be able to enjoy the things you have bought in the game, and yeah, just to enjoy the game. So you can withdraw, but then we won't provide you the service. So it's kind of interesting, and we are almost seeing this as a blackmail, for you to stay on the platform. So yeah, it's what I just said. Like, it's very, very hard to enforce these rights.
So something that we asked ourselves is it easy to sue them? Let's say we want to sue them. Well, it's kind of hard because when you look at the terms of services of these video game company, a lot of them have clauses like this one, where you can see you have to go to a Japanese tribunal. That's kind of hard when you're Canadian. But sometimes it's even worse because they have arbitration clauses. A lot of them have arbitration clauses, which are actually not legal in Canada for consumer contracts. But they put them in there anyway, and a lot of people don't know that they're invalid in Canadian law. And there's a lot of things we saw in these arbitration clauses that are quite surprising. For example, they will say that no class action is permitted, so you have to go in there alone. Be prepared to spend some money. Sometimes you have to go in Thailand. Sometimes you have to go to the US. I mean, if you're American, it's great. If you're Canadian, it might be complicated. You have to travel. You have to go there. You have to go to Europe. We also found some penalties for bad faith, and the definition that they give of bad faith differs from one policy to another, and sometimes is extremely broad. So you could have penalties if you bring a claim to arbitration that would be considered bad faith, and a very broad definition of bad faith. Also, arbitration sometimes have rules about disclosure of evidence that may differ, that are a lot more restrictive. So that's something that also could challenge. It could be a challenge if you want to go to arbitration. So basically, it's really hard to go to arbitration. It costs a lot of money. You have to go in there alone. And as I said, those clauses are in most cases illegal in Canada. So it's quite surprising to see them in these terms of services. We can't hear you.
Now you can hear me. So what can we do with this situation? We have some strategy we can explore. The first one would be to try to make some clauses declare unfair, because like according to some in some territories it would be unfair, and we have already some leads for some clause here in Canada. We could file a complaint with the privacy commissary in Canada. It's one public authority. We could like refer the case and make it known, and it's what we have done with a report we have sent to the commissaire earlier this spring. You can of course go to the media and make like a lot of noise with this. It's what we did as well, and we have seen some improvement. You can find a class action lawsuit. You have there was a case. There is a case pending in Quebec, which is directly related to the research we have made and we have published earlier this spring. So I think it's almost 50 video game companies that are targeted, and we are talking about more than 500 games aimed at children. And it's mostly because the game was not protecting the children under the age of 14 years old. It was protecting somehow children below 13 years old, but not 14, which is a rule in Quebec. So there is a class action there. And with class action, when you have one, usually you get other ones like in other territories, because people think, oh, okay, if it applies there, maybe it's the same for us. And maybe one last strategy we are exploring with Gabriel at the moment, it's to try to regulate the form and the content of the privacy policy. So we are working on trying to draft a standard privacy policy to share it with the actors of the industry and to tell them, guys, if you want to respect the legal framework here in Canada or here in the US, here is what you should do or what you should use. So we want to provide them with a model, so they cannot say like, oh, we don't know how to do it, or we don't want to do it, whatever. So that's why we want to propose this model. So we have a lot of solution, but what we have found in this field is that it's very, very complex to study, very technical. Gabriel worked with a colleague, another student, last year on these policies, and at the very beginning, it was super difficult to understand because we are not used to read this, and it's a lot of technicality in it. But once you read quite a few, it's always the same, so you get used to it. But for the public, it's very, very hard. So that's why like lawsuit can be a solution, and also the information of the public in general. But I don't want to put the burden only on the parents or on the players, because it's very, very hard to do this. And what you would expect from the company, at least, is for them to respect the basic legal framework in the countries they are operating. And what we have found in our research is that they don't even do this. They don't even respect the basic legal rules in Canada, in Quebec, or in the US. So we are done and we can take questions.
All right. Would you all like me to read them again?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a comment and a question. I wonder if the speakers can talk a bit about how gaming hardware affects data collected. I imagine different types of controllers, mobile versus Xbox, etc., and hardware devices, VR and TV, would provide different potential areas of data collection.
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on what they have access to. Like if there is a camera on your device, sometimes they will have access to your camera, and they will be able to, yeah, but they tell you we might have access to your camera. So depending on what you use, they will collect more or less data.
Next question. So this is a comment for us as organizers, but also maybe you can let us know what you think is the viability of this. Is it possible for future events to have a speaker with a large game from a large game maker to talk about their data collection, what they use, and how researchers may be able to see some of this information for research purposes? So I guess what are your all experiences working in this space with working with actual game developers and publishers and sharing data, and what's the possibility of that?
I'm not sure I understand exactly what I could share. Which data were you talking about?
I think they're specifically talking about the data that is collected by the users, how they're using it, what they are collecting, specifically sort of behind the scenes information that
Oh,
is beyond publicly available
oh yeah.
information.
Yeah, and it's very hard to get access to this. Again, like to understand the economy of data, like in the back end, it's very, very hard. As Gabriel said, sometimes you have a lot of third parties involved. So it just like we shared and shared and shared, and you completely lose control and you don't know where it is. So it's very hard to track the data and to know exactly like where it is. And for this, we are just lawyers, huh? So we don't know a lot about these technicalities, but I would love to have like people explaining us how it works. And it's I've heard about this expression of player acquisition from a developer from a studio in Montreal, and I was like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about like advertisement? You are putting a poster in the street or something like this? No, 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 no. Like player acquisition is like getting access to the profile of players who might like the games that they are just releasing, and specifically targeting them to try to get them to their platform. So it's advertisement, but like with testosterone. So you really like target specific people to try to get them to your platform. And this is just one aspect, but the data, I think, and as a lawyer, I don't realize it, like the value of it. I was also told by a developer, if you want to know your market for the App Store and to know which game are being played by who, how long, whatever, blah, blah, just having access to this data from the App Store, you would pay a company right now, he says something like 60,000 per year just to get the monitoring and to know what is working, what is played, not played on the App Store before you release your game, to make sure you will actually be able to sell it and target the right people. So this data, the value is huge, but we don't know exactly because they don't talk about it. One way we could try, and we have tried with students, is to look at the report of companies which are public. But from my experience, they don't go into a lot of detail about this issue.
I'll point this question to Gabriel. I would like to know if there are some ways for these game makers to make some data used for researchers. Would be like how Fitbit has allowed some data for answering research questions about movement behaviors.
That's a good question. I don't know if they'd be ready to give that data out. I don't know what you think about it, Thomas.
I think that there are some projects like this. Montreal, Ubisoft in Montreal has some
Okay.
La Forge. So they have like some partnership with researcher for some projects. But here we are talking about personal data sometimes. So I think they would say it's for privacy reasons we don't share it. But yeah, because they could be sued for this. But at the same time, we have seen that sometimes they don't care to be sued and they would do something illegal and they don't care. No, but I'm sure there is a way to collaborate and even to protect the data from a research perspective, it's possible. But as Gabriel said, like, would they take the risk to do this? I'm not sure. They don't have an interest to do this.
We're going to have to wrap it up there. So I appreciate you both taking your time. Who knows what lawyers up in Canada get paid per hour? So you just gave us an hour, but you can send us a bill. We appreciate you.
We don't bill at the university. We don't bill.
We appreciate you all sharing your expertise with this, both of these presentations, and I'm going to pre-queue some of the information coming up before our handover to Michigan State. So thank you, Thomas and Gabriel. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.